to the three presidents considered the progressive era presidents, let's look at some other political elements here. One group in particular actually uh, it feeds into the concept of also we have these three progressive era presidents, but it's important to remember that a lot of this change, a lot of these policies, and this changing attitude in the progressive era about the function of government and the role of the state. The role of the state is an advocate of the consumer and the worker, as well as the corporate interest. Uh, Happens at the local level. You have people like Hiram Johnson, governor of California, people like La Follette in Wisconsin, uh, and you have the Socialist Party, which elects scores of lots of local people, folks. I believe not the progressive era, somewhat later in the 20s, Milwaukee is going to have a socialist mayor. In Wisconsin, very large, American city with a socialist mayor. And the Socialist Party is led by, really, as far as being their presidential nominee 5 times, this man on the left here, Eugene Victor Debs, who is going to run for president for the Socialist Party 5 times. In 1912 and in 1920, he is going to receive nearly 1 million votes, which I'm not sure if that seems like a lot to you. It's about 6% of the vote at the time. To give you some perspective, 6% of the vote that Debs won in 1912 and in 1920. In 1920, he's running for a president from behind a prison cell. Right, he's been sentenced because of World War I. We'll get into that later. He gets 6% of the vote twice. In the last election we had, the 2016 presidential election, the two third-party candidates, the two, for lack of a better term, high-profile third-party candidates, Gary Johnson of the Libertarians, Jill Stein of the Green Party, combined received about 4.5%. Right, so combined, not as much as this guy, right? Eugene Debs. And this is important because the Socialist Party is really, particularly with the first of the progressive presidents, Theodore Roosevelt, is going to push the government to action. Theodore Roosevelt's going to see the Socialist Party gaining ground. This guy Debs is very influential. The Socialist Party only has maybe 150,000 members, but he's getting nearly 1 million votes. People are choosing this guy because he's honest. In a time of political corruption, corporate corruption, they see this guy as an honest advocate of the people. And so Roosevelt recognizes this, and Roosevelt recognizes that as the Socialist Party and radical class-conscious groups like the anarchists, the industrial workers of the world, an industrial union, which are really revolutionary, right? The Socialist Party is a revolutionary group. You want to fundamentally change American society, its economy, possibly even, with a new constitution. Excuse me. Whoa, that was more intense than I thought it would be. Roosevelt particularly recognizes if for the government to do nothing, you're just going to feed into these groups. People are going to build a class consciousness, right? People have, like Teddy Roosevelt and definitely Franklin Roosevelt later on, have read Looking Forward, Looking Backward, Ed Bellamy, the book published in the 1880s about sort of the Gilded Age and nothing being done to prevent this sort of wealth inequality, massive poverty, and you create class consciousness till there's some sort of worker revolution, right? Like you'll see in the 20th century in Russia and Cuba and other places. So Teddy Roosevelt recognizes if we do something, we show the people we get what's going on. We get that there's inequality. We get it. We're going to try to do things to alleviate your suffering, to check the excesses of capitalism. It will sort of squash or get in the way of a class consciousness. America doesn't have as much of a class consciousness as, say, Europe. For various reasons. People were given the right to vote much earlier. White men in the 1800s were given the right to vote very early. So as opposed to being shut out of the political process and identifying along class lines, all classes of white people were given the right to vote. So you're a Democrat. You're not a working class person. You're a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. And also because as opposed to places where there was nothing being done, there was a monarchy or nobility or nothing was done at all, and there was a sort of a revolution that fundamentally alters stuff and sets in motion a communist socialist style government. America sort of slowly socialized capitalism, right? And that's important to remember because in our own time, because I remember, I don't know if you recall when the Bush tax cuts were set to expire, and the idea was under the Obama administration, well, let's let the tax cuts just expire for the wealthiest Americans. It was called class warfare, right? However, if you see this situation, to let the Bush tax cuts expire for the wealthiest Americans, Teddy Roosevelt might say, is the opposite of class warfare. It's preventing class warfare. You're showing the people, hey, we get it. These people are rich. They can pay a little more. You see what I'm saying? So you have Eugene Debs. You have the industrial workers of the world, industrial union, very different from the AFL. As you can see, right? The AFL, pure and simple unionism, 8-hour day, maybe raise wages a little bit. These guys are calling for abolition of the wage system, right? They are what you would call anarcho-syndicalists. They believe in abolishing the state, abolishing capital, and having some sort of worker-run society. Trade union, but run by trade unions, right? Once again, go to your philosophy class to learn about those things. They are formed in 1905. Debs is a supporter, even though he's a socialist, and they're a lot of anarchists. Emma Goldman is another person who is not necessarily a member, I don't think, but very much closely aligned with these folks. You can see Debs, Emma Goldman, and the industrial workers of the world, also called the Wobblies, WOBBLIES. You can see them as sort of the trifecta of radical left-wing thought in the progressive era, and then folks like the progressive presidents that we'll get to as sort of more moderate center, right of center. So let's get to the progressive presidents right now. This is going great.